Hey everybody, how you doing? It's Alex Moyle here for the Business Development Show, and this week I'm here with Jason Walkingshaw, and he's an employee engagement specialist, and he's here to sort of help us on how do we create a workplace where people actually feel good about coming to work and sort of unlock that discretionary effort that they've got to give. Because what we want when we think about our workplaces is we want people that are going to come and actually, you know what, just work hard. They're not just turn up for a base salary, but go that extra mile to help the business do well. And I think one of the reasons why Jason's going to be great for us today is that he's been part of one of the most successful startups in the UK. Was head of employee engagement at OVO Energy, which went from zero people that they were providing energy to 700,000. So it's been a really successful disruptor, and they've worked really hard to change that culture. So hello, Jason.
Hey, hi, Alex. Thanks for the intro.
Good. Well, so I know OVO's a great business, and I know they really try to mix up the energy market and disrupt it.
Yeah, so I think, for probably give you a bit of background for those of you that don't know OVO Energy that much. It was launched maybe about 7.5 years ago. And the guy the founder of it, Stephen, had actually never worked in the energy business. He'd never spent a day, and he thought, look, there's got to be a better way of trying to do this. And that's kind of he set up OVO, and he actually did it from a customer's point of view. He said, look, I don't know what a good energy company looks like, but I think I know what good customer service looks like. So let's just build it with a customer in mind. So that's the whole idea of OVO, and it's really grown. So now, 7.5 years on, there are about 1,200 people that work there, and like you said, probably just under 700,000 customers. So it's really grown. That's
tremendous. And I know as you go through that sort of growth, there'll be lots of challenges. So what we're gonna go through today, I think we've got 3 topics that we're going to go through. We're going to go through what do you do how do you make a motivated workplace when you sell a product that fundamentally is pretty boring or is unpopular with the public. We're also then going to look at how do you actually create a positive workplace culture where people enjoy the environment that they work in. And then lastly, just how do you create an environment where there's a feedback culture between sort of the leadership team and the participants as well. So, and I mean, Jason's well placed because not only has he got a lot of experience at OVO, he's also now a consultant for other companies as well. So he'll be able to share some broader range of market experiences as well. So Jason, first question for you is that, like, what do you do? How do you get a really a good motivated workforce when the product you sell or the service you sell is pretty boring?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think I'll probably start with kind of where I've come from most recently with OVO Energy, and energy is probably not the most exciting product or service. It's not like people either they go home, they get excited about reading their bills, or when you go into work, you're thinking, great, what's a kilowatt hour? So people don't naturally get excited about energy. So I think that's probably the first place to start.
Almost like a necessary evil.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those essentials that people need, but they don't necessarily want. But and I think what we did at OVO that we really tried to focus on was we talked a lot about our brand purpose. So what was our why? And I think that's what motivated people. Whilst people that worked at OVO wouldn't necessarily, might not have found energy the most interesting thing. I think the message and the whole thing about OVO was about trying to treat customers fairly. We at OVO felt that I guess consumers probably hadn't got a fair deal from the energy suppliers in the past. And Steve, and he really created this culture of, look, let's just do our best to treat customers fairly and try and offer them, a really good service. And I think that's what people really wanted, and that's what people bought into, and that was that whole brand purpose. So actually, why do we do this? That's something that really stood out for everybody.
I guess also most people have bought energy and had a pretty average experience. So most of the people you employed knew what bad looked like.
Yeah, exactly. Most people had some sort of experience with energy. Having said that, a lot of people I speak to are like, who's their energy supplier? A lot of people can't even tell you who their energy supplier is because they're that disengaged. And in fact, that was part of our big challenges, was how do we get our customers really engaged? to want to give us a meter read, to want to look at their bills, and actually to even want to swap suppliers. So.
Okay, so what advice? I mean, we've got a lot of recruitment business owners and leaders on the phone on their viewing here, and I mean, whilst they're not the most popular, the dissatisfaction a lot of people have with recruiters is pretty visceral sometimes. So, what advice would you give to leaders in those type of businesses to sort of try and get their teams to be more just motivated to want to perform when in an environment where when they pick up the phone or email, most people don't really think particularly highly of them?
Well, I'd probably start off by saying that I think energy suppliers are probably at an even lower level, probably about 6 or 7 years ago when OVO first came in. Then the trust in energy companies was probably an all-time low, 6, 7 years ago, and the energy companies have typically had a really bad press. So I think I can, from my background at OVO, we can totally relate to that. I think one phrase that we often spoke about is, focus on how good EX delivers good CX. So we said, look, let's focus on how good employee experience delivers good customer experience. So we put a lot of focus on our employees, and actually, one of the things that we looked at was the kind of culture and the kind of people that we wanted to recruit. So we recruited, whenever we recruited, we focused a lot on values, value-centric people that shared similar values to OVO and trying to make a difference. And I think when you're kind of in a smaller business, people get a chance to make more of an input. It's not like when you're going into sometimes a bigger company, people might feel like they might just be another number. They're just kind of, there for a paycheck. Whereas I think sometimes if you can create an environment where you're actually making a contribution to the success of the company, it really helps.
How do you reconcile that with most sales teams? Well, I mean, I'm paid on what I bill, right? So surely my number one aim is for me to bill, then I get paid, and like I'll treat people okay along the way. So how do you overcome that individual centric environment?
So what we did with the sales team at OVO is we made sure, I guess one of the first things that we said, look, sales are important, but our customer experience is more important than anything else. And actually the way that we incentivized people was that depending on what your quality score was and what your customer feedback was, we'd almost, you'd put a multiplier on someone's, bonus. So if they performed really well and they got great feedback from their customers and their team, they'd actually get a higher bonus. So it wasn't always related to the number of sales, but also how they did it. And that was a big emphasis on OVO. So a lot of your appraisal was based on what you did, but also how you did it.
So you're telling me you still managed to recruit salespeople, but told they were paid on not what they were billing, but actually how people felt about the service they delivered.
Yeah, and I think that also comes exactly because it comes down to our brand purpose and our story. And we think, look, let's not, if we're just doing it for the money, we're probably going to attract people that were just focused on the cash, and we're more focused on making sales rather than the bigger picture. And what we're trying to do is, look, we're trying to be a disruptor brand in an archaic industry. We can't think like everybody else. So we got to think, look, how do we want to do this? And I think, Alex, nowadays, millennials, and I think I read a stat the other day, by 2020, 50% of the workforce are going to be millennials. I think millennials relate to that a lot more. And actually, I think even the Generation X people relate to that a lot more as well. So that purpose and the why is becoming more and more important.
So you would accept lower sales performance for people that were more willing to engage with delivering a good service?
I think that's true.
Startup, you need new subscribers, you need people signing up. So I'm still struggling to get my head around that sort of juxtaposition.
Yeah, well, I think again, when OVO, as you said, when you're a startup and you're just trying to get cash to the door and generate revenue. However, we want to take a step back and say, well, actually, what's doing this right? Is this right for the customer? So, for example, we never offered teaser rates, even though it would have been easier to sell to new customers if we gave people discounted rates. We never did that because it went against what we did. So we said, look, we want to treat all customers fairly. And we said, actually, maybe price isn't the most important thing. Could service be something that's a real differentiator. And we got people buying into that, and that's generally what we believe in as a business, and that's how we recruited.
Right. And so how did that correlate with, obviously you probably employed a few millennials. What about attracting sort of those that be motivating those that have been in the workplace longer? So those that were maybe more before Generation Y, sort of before Generation X. What was or baby boomers or whatever.
I think even nowadays, sort of like your baby boomers are tending to be a bit more, okay, well, why is this? I don't, how does this company actually, how do my values stack up with the company values? And I think because a lot of people have probably had a negative experience, and not all, just to kind of shout that out there, there are times when people get great experiences with their energy company, but we were certainly finding a lot of people didn't really have that trust with their energy company. And so people that were kind of joining us could actually see where we're coming from. And they said, actually, yeah, I want to be part of that. That sounds a really good story. I believe in that as well, regardless of whether I'm a millennial, Gen X, or a baby boomer. So that was something that again, it was the people that we were trying to recruit, that culture we were trying to build. It wasn't just an outputs culture of sales numbers and sales targets. It was more a case of, okay, actually, what are we trying to build here? Okay.
And so when it comes to sort of the workplace culture, I know OVO had a shared as a meeting room. And I know Steve was excited about that. Is it just about having a pool table and some bean bags that makes everyone feel like they've got a great place to work?
No. I think if you go around a lot of offices nowadays, you see bean bags, pool tables, table tennis tables. And whilst I think that can sometimes be, good and fun, it's more of just about, everything else that goes around about it. So, for example, at OVO, we had a lot of fun meeting rooms that were based after innovators. So, we had Thomas Edison as kind of being one of our meeting rooms, and that was themed after that. So that always kind of came back to a little bit about our culture and some of the stories we're trying to build, which is, trying to find a way. But it's also just, one thing I think that kind of tries to bring companies and teams together is we used to have a monthly town hall where the whole company would come together. And we still do it now when you bring the best part of sort of 1,200 people together. And it's a monthly meeting, typically discuss like some of the objectives, how we're doing, but also it's a real session for a Q&A session. So it gives people a chance for that two-way communication. But it was really nice that regardless of what department or team or seniority, we all came together once a month, and it felt as though we're, to communicate things. So that helps sort of build that in the workplace.
And how did those town halls are great, but the assumption is often that those running them don't really want to be asked tough questions. How did you make sure you discussed the good things and the bad things that people were feeling?
I think it's really important that, you do discuss the challenges that you're having. I think, you have to try and be as transparent as possible. And I think Steve at OVO was very open about that. However, there are other forms of communication as well. So, for example, we'd run like an employee forum, and that sometimes can get into the detail a little bit more. Or we used to have focus groups. The other thing we focused a lot on, we had a 6-monthly employee engagement survey that we asked people to fill out. There's about 50 questions. So we get quite a lot of feedback. However, the key is also trying to act on that feedback, because I think sometimes it can turn into quite negative if you ask a question or you provide some feedback and nothing gets done on it.
No, I agree with that. And so how did you go about communicating? So when you do those engagement surveys, how did you tell people what you'd heard and what you were going to do about it?
So we kind of go and present the overall results for the business, so that we kind of show how we did on sort of different areas. We then took it a stage down below and tried to make it specific to each team or department. So what might affect one department might be different from another one. So then we kind of worked with the departments more specifically on the data we got back from themselves. So we tried to tailor it a little bit. However, we often found there were some sort of like, key things that appeal to everyone. Obviously, that was another focus for the whole business.
Okay, and how did you, like, when the business is growing, and I appreciate OVO grew a lot, so how do you maintain that level of motivation when you're managing underperformance? Because, as I said, when the weather's sunny and the wind's light and we're all sitting out there and drinking cocktails on the patio, it's easy to sort of to be motivated when you're going out to work. So how did you manage underperformance?
I guess when you say underperformance, I think we probably, because there with 1,200 people, I probably more look at it through challenging times. So as a business, whether it be sometimes cyclical, I think you have to give people hope. So I think sometimes those village halls and town halls can be quite good because it gives people hope on actually what we're trying to achieve. So, for example, people in operations, about 60 or 70%, I think, of the people OVO work in operations or customer service facing roles. Sometimes there's just such a big workload. They can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's trying to give them hope and actually show them some either small wins or working on projects that are saying, cool, actually, we're kind of getting there. But it keeps on telling the story, reminding them, why are we doing this? Because we're trying to do it, better for our employees and better for our customers. So it's trying to give them hope, but also explain the reasons why.
And so what sort of, did you have any specific behavioral challenges that you had to try and address within your team? Because again, in smaller companies or in smaller teams, a lot of times the vision and the purpose of the organization is one thing, but day to day, how Johnny gets on with Sally, and how sort of Bruce gets on with Sanjid, that's so how did you align those day-to-day challenges with the values?
I think so again, when we're kind of recruiting, we focus a lot on values and capabilities, but values was such a big thing for us, and I think I can't remember who says the quote, but is it sort of like culture eats strategy for breakfast? So making sure that we always had the right culture. And it sometimes meant that we actually went and revisited our values. So we actually tweaked our values. Over the 7 years, we have changed them once or twice. But I think also in the most recent one, we're trying to ask people actually, how do those values look to you in your workplace? And trying to empower our teams in order to do that. And it almost feels like actually it's the team members, the employees that almost own the values and they're the ones responsible for it. So I think it should be good you should be able to call people out for doing things that are right. However, you've got to try and also have a workplace culture where you can call people out when things aren't doing so well.
Okay, so I think someone's just shouted out, it was Peter Drucker that said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if I just move on to the recruitment side of things. So in your, obviously OVO grew really quickly, and I know from my past life, I went and was part of a team that pitched to be a partner, a recruitment partner. How did you take the culture that you were trying to build, and how did you ensure that your recruitment partners helped you execute that strategy? Because obviously most recruiters, they're incentivized by doing deals, by making placements and getting interviews. So how did you engage with them on that?
So I think it was really important to us that our recruiters, they knew our culture. They knew that what was important about working at OVO. I think once recruiters, you probably answer this better than, you can probably be a testimonial, is that when you come into OVO, it's sometimes hard to describe the culture, but once you kind of get a feel for it, you see the environment, you realize actually, okay, cool. I can understand, or I can see why this will be a differentiator when I'm speaking to clients. So I think it was really making sure that our recruiters understood what we were looking for. It wasn't just, these are our values, read them, but actually come in, try and understand what they look like, understand the why and the how. So why are we trying to build this business? What's our vision and what's our mission and how we're trying to do it? And I think, from our point of view, that was really key, because it can be frustrating. I think if you're sitting on the other side and you probably get somebody that you're interviewing, somebody that isn't a good fit culturally, it felt that actually, it's not great use of your time or the prospect's time. So I think, trying to understand your client and what they're looking for, that is a really big thing.
And I think just for those that are watching, I think a lot of recruiters really struggle in today's market to build relationships with internal recruitment teams and HR teams, often seeing them as a barrier to actually doing business with the line manager, who probably care really about the technical discipline and their ability to do the job. And actually, if recruiters can begin to engage with HR or internal recruitment teams around the values and the culture of the organization, they're much more sort of predisposed to liking you and dealing with you, because ultimately, a lot of times HR or that wider sort of people talent management part of the organization, it sort of takes the implicit ownership of that part of the business. And so a great way into building relationships is asking about how well their existing agencies understand their values and actually replicate those values through the recruitment process. So you might not realize it, but most recruiters are actually in the HR industry. They're just an outsourced part of talent acquisition. So, was there any, when you were thinking about recruiting for values, what sort of things did you do to work out whether they differentiate between what they were saying and actually what they really believed in?
It's a good question. And it's a tough one, because there's sometimes you got things right, and there's sometimes you probably didn't, select the right candidate. Again, I think a lot of the recruitment at OVO we did was, I guess, what you term volume recruitment in the sort of customer service agents or back office agents. So, from that aspect, we actually planned out like a half-day assessment center for those. And I don't know in the industry, is that, that might be more than normal for someone who's going to be typically on the phones or doing an admin role. But we would kind of take them through, obviously typically go through their CV, do a role play, and then we try and find out as much about them from a values perspective as their fit. And I think probably recruiters would probably do that ahead of time. I think nowadays people try and match their values to a company's values necessarily, rather than wanting to be in this line of work the whole time. So I think candidates will naturally probably opt in or opt out of companies that they feel meet their values a lot more. And that's why I think culture and brand purpose play such a big role in company success nowadays. And
so, but candidates, if I'm looking for a job, I'm going to say that I'm a good team player. And how do you get me to evidence the fact that I am a good team player? Because no one says I'm horrible with people.
No, I know. And I think
in fact, that would be refreshing when people go, you know what, I don't like working with people, but I'm going to earn you a ton of cash. That would be, but that's the challenge that managers have. So how did you get under the skin of that?
It's a really good question. And, I think sometimes we probably did it right. Sometimes we probably didn't do it so well. Having said that, there were times when people were quite honest with us and say, actually, there are a number of times when people say, actually, speaking to customers is not what I want to do all the time. And we've suggested that they look at one of the other roles that we have that might be more in industry operations. That might be more sort of back office. You're still helping customers, but not speaking. So there were times when people would be really honest with us about kind of what they liked doing. And we would say, maybe this other role might be a bit better for you. And in the volume areas, that was a bit easier to do.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. And so what questions would you, if you're engaging an external recruiter, what questions would you expect them to be able to ask, expect them to have asked their candidates for you to feel like they'd been an extension of your internal recruitment process?
I think I'm trying to think of specific questions. It's probably,
or if you were to say it another way, we can say what didn't they do that showed they care about getting the fee rather than you getting the right person?
So I think, for example, sometimes people say, describe the culture at OVO. So sometimes one of our values is about enjoying the journey. So people will sometimes say, it's quite a fun company to work for. And I totally get that. And it very much is, there's a lot of, excuse the pun, there's a lot of energy that's kind of going around. But we sometimes find people just want to come because, cool, I heard it was fun here. I heard that you had table tennis or you had, pool and stuff like that. So I heard it was a fun place to work. But sometimes we have to say, look, that is part of who we are, and we definitely want it to be fun. However, we have to be here for the customer as well. So making sure we service that customer, whether it be answering calls and delivering great customer service, or making sure we actually build great products for our customers is the key thing. So that was one where actually recruiters would sometimes say, are you looking for fun? Great. And they probably maybe oversold the social aspect of it more than the professional. And there's got to be a fine balance.
Right. Okay. So I guess that recruiters are incentivized to get people in the door, right? So
they're incentivized to get people in the door, but they're incentivized more if they probably stay for the longer term. And there's repeat business, and you're building a relationship.
That is also that is also true. So if you were to so if I was a director of a 15 or sort of 30 person firm, and I'm sort of struggling to get my guys up for doing the nuts and bolts every day, what would be your top 3 things that you'd give me to do today that I could, or over the next sort of week, that I could really start to action that would help my business be more productive through more motivational employees?
So I think one that I'm always really passionate about is kind of revisit your brand purpose and your values. I think a lot of businesses might have started a business. Sometimes business owners might actually have started a business and it's turning over revenue, but haven't had time to go look at their values or their brand purpose as to the why. So I think it's sometimes good to revisit that. Sometimes even if you've already done it, it's okay just to double check it every so often and sometimes tweak it. So I think making sure you have some values that stand for what you believe in is important. So I think that's the first thing. I think secondly, I'd ask their employees, ask your team. They'll often come up with some solutions, and I often say is don't come up with a problem, try and come up with a solution. So I think being able to ask and have a two-way dialogue with your team is kind of really important, and you'll come up with some great ideas that your employees put forward. Some of the best ideas we had at OVO were ones that actually based off projects where people fed into them, and sometimes more junior people. So I think making sure and ask your employees and what they want implemented is really key. And then you have to show actions coming off the back of that.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's some terrific advice there, Jason. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you're busy with a new arrival in the family. So I'm sure we were half expecting in the prep for this meeting to expect like the little baby to come up and replicate that situation that happened the other day in that guy being interviewed for CNN or whatever. So, but thanks very much, Jason. I really appreciate your time. For everyone that's watching, I'd really encourage you to watch the other videos that we've got on YouTube. It's under Alex Moyle. Come to the Facebook group, Alex Moyle Performance and Learning. Or if you want more tips and chat day to day, then we've got the Sales Leaders Growth Group, which you're welcome to find. And there's a link on my Facebook page as well. So please like, follow, share. We want to build a big audience in this. And remember, as part of the Recruiter Zone, there is other shows that are taking place. We've got Katrina Collier with a social recruiting show. You've got Steve Ward, who's talking about talent acquisition. And we've got the ever-present and legendary Stephen O'Donnell and Louise Triance talking about technology and recruitment. So thanks for joining the Recruitment Zone. I'm Alex Moyle, and we will see you soon. Take care. Goodbye.
Cheers.